Hey, I'll do a quick intro and then we'll run through our excellent speakers, and then we've got time for basically deciding what to do next. I want to introduce it by, just reflecting that I feel, maybe you all do, that I feel these are momentous times. It feels like one can actually see change happening, whether it's change for the better or change for the worst. And that's most immediately because of COVID-19 and the lockdown, which to an extent that you feel that might have been a distraction from all the full attention we need to give to tackling climate change. And we can recall that sense of the movement which was burgeoning in 2019 when, before the XR and the school strikes and so on. Actually, just on that, one of the last events I remember taking part in 2019 was the protest we organized for COP25, which was a human chain along Prince's Street. And we had, those were the photographs I was going to show you, but I'm a bit freaked out by trying to share my screen at the moment. So you'll see them another time. That was a year before that. We did a great march around the town for COP24. So we have a tradition of getting organized around the COP. But actually also COVID has given us new insights, but also I think new hopes, because we've actually seen the state move decisively to protect public health over the interests of what you might call keeping the economy going. And that's even a state managed by the Tories. Obviously, we don't think they've done it the right way, but that shows us the opportunities there are. It shows us that we can win the kind of state action we need to take the kind of actions we need on climate change. And also, there's clearly the opportunities to link the struggle on climate change with recovery, with issues around unemployment and employment, around care, and around just transition. And of course, we're here because we've got the focus for that, for our hopes and fears. We have a COP26 coming up in Glasgow, and we're here to organize in Edinburgh around that. And I think without prejudging what people will want to do, it's definitely about explaining what's happening, explaining what, and using that as an opportunity to explain it to people in Edinburgh, in our communities, in our homes, not just what's happening in Glasgow, but why climate change is so vitally important, and all the ways that you can address it, and how you can, it'll involve mobilizing people and offering support to people from all over the world who plan to attend the COP. And each of our organizations has started to think about this, I think, but we're stronger together. Don't want to echo an unfortunate phrase, stronger together. We're very glad, I'm very glad that the founding of this coalition comes from organizations in the environmental movement and the labor movement. And I think that coming together, that coherence is incredibly fruitful. And it's really great that a whole lot more organizations have also joined. So this is the point where I would hope to do something inspiring and motivating, but actually I'm not, because I'm going to show you, or I think Katie is going to show you, the fantastic video made for From the Ground Up by the COP26 Coalition, which will do so much more than I could possibly do in 2 minutes, and so much better, that I think it was the best way I could think of starting off like an introduction to all the wide issues which are arising. So Katie, are you up for going? Fingers crossed. Share your screen and...
Yeah, I hope this works. Is that good?
Yes, it hasn't started yet.
Can everyone see?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Homes across England and Wales were evacuated after widespread flooding.
India fearing dozens of people are dead after part of a Himalayan glacier collapsed.
We truly did everything we could. There were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody.
Millions of electricity in Texas, coldest temperatures in more than a century.
Communities who were battered by the bushfires are now being battered by the floods.
Chega de frescura, de mimimi. Vão ficar chorando até quando?
Ministers are set to recommend a 1% pay rise, likely to mean a real terms pay cut.
We truly did everything we could.
Exposure to fine particulate matter from fossil fuels accounted for nearly 1 in 5 deaths in 2018.
Ministers will allow oil and gas exploration in the North Sea to find new reserves.
And continue to do everything that we can.
Thousands of people queuing for over 2 kilometers to get access to food banks. Rich countries have bought up the majority of the supply of multiple vaccines.
This is the failure in solidarity.
Which is what capitalism is basically all about.
I don't support protest.
Enough is enough.
O poder da vida está na natureza. Salve o planeta!
Thanks. It might have been a bit flaky for you all. It was for me. But if you want to see it in its actual glory, go to the COP26 Coalition and the events gathering, and it's still up there on that page. And it's a great video made by Jay from Edinburgh. So thanks, Jay, for that. Okay, so we'll move on. We want to introduce Mary, Friends of the Earth Scotland, and a key mover in the COP26 Coalition. And she is going to tell us what we need to know about it, not only why it's important, but when and how it might happen, and about mobilization plans from the COP26 Coalition. Over to you, Mary. And I should be able to spotlight. There you go.
Thanks, Matthew. And thanks for inviting me to speak tonight. I actually have a slightly dodgy internet connection and I've lost my Ethernet cable. So if can you sort of wave at me if it's going in and out, and I can switch off the camera if I need to be clearer. So yeah, I've been asked to talk about COP26, so what it is, what we're expecting from it. It's a bit of a challenge in the sort of 5 or 10 minutes that I've been told I have. So I'm going to start with some of the basics, and then if there's a bit more time, we can go into some more detail, and maybe that can come out in some questions and things as well. But just don't want to assume sort of, I know can see some familiar faces here who will know this stuff inside out, so please bear with me, but also don't want to assume too much knowledge about the COP, where it comes from and all the rest of it. So I will start with some of the quite basic bits and pieces. So first of all, COP, what is it? It's an abbreviation of Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is abbreviated to the UNFCCC. There are so many abbreviations and bits of jargon in this world. It's an absolute nightmare. The UNFCCC is a treaty that's aimed at stabilizing climate change that came out of the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. It sets the broad sort of overarching framework for international climate action, and then further international agreements have been negotiated under this broad umbrella of the broad framework of the UNFCCC, setting out more details of, for example, what temperature levels we should be aiming to limit warming at, and which countries need to do what and how. So namely the Kyoto Protocol and now the Paris Agreement, which I'm sure you all know has set the hugely important goal of limiting warming to no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade. And so the Climate COP, as it's known, is the annual conference and the main forum for negotiations and decision making under this broad framework convention, and in respect of the Paris Agreement as well. So COPs have been taking place every year since 1995. The Glasgow summit will be the 26th of these. That's why it's known as COP26. And because climate change literally touches everything, it's a space that the COPs are a space where, you know, the reality of global geopolitics and global inequalities are laid bare. And it's been described by some in the climate justice movement as a space where we negotiate who lives and dies, essentially. So why are COPs important for us in the climate movement? So basically every year the COP is a major focus for the climate movement. We seek to influence both the negotiations themselves, the outcome of the negotiations themselves, but also, and perhaps more importantly, use the summit as an opportunity to build momentum around climate action in the host nation. So in this case, Scotland and the UK. And generally, in non-pandemic years, you get thousands of activists, climate justice activists and international organizations traveling to the COP to participate both in the inside the official UN spaces and also on the outside of the COP. So equally important, the whole host of activities and events and demonstrations and everything that wider civil society puts on. And a really important part of our role in the climate justice movement is to ensure that the voices of those most at risk from the climate crisis are heard in and around the summit. So this means the voices of people from the global south, indigenous peoples and frontline communities here at home and also overseas. And so that's why we've come together in the COP26 Coalition, which is an umbrella civil society coalition made up of groups and individuals from a whole range of constituencies in Scotland and the rest of the UK. So trade unions, direct action networks, climate justice groups, environment and development NGOs, faith groups, student and youth networks, migrant and racial justice networks, to organise together around both the opportunities and the responsibilities that COP26 brings, right, to the host nation, but specifically in a way that centres climate justice. I'm going to pop these aims. These are the aims of the COP26 Coalition. I'm going to pop them in the chat, but just to quickly also run through them. So our aims in coming together are to organise around the COP in a transformative, climate justice centred way that creates space for hope and is inclusive and accountable to the breadth of civil society and international climate movements. To use the COP as a moment to strengthen the Scottish, UK and international climate justice movement to build power for system change. So recognising this isn't just about 2 weeks of a COP being held in November this year. This is about building, it's a year or more in this case, of building up to and the legacy, you know, long after COP has left town. And also to enable civil society to use the COP as leverage to make gains at the domestic level that advance climate justice and ensure the best outcome from COP itself. And so basically the biggest impact that we can have on the negotiations and on national and local government is by organising together inside and outside the COP to show how strong and diverse the climate justice movement is, call out the greenwash and articulate our collective demands for real climate action. So far the coalition has organised two really great online gatherings called From the Ground Up, the first one back in October last year and the recent one, which hopefully some of you got to just this weekend gone by, and we had over 10,000 participants across both of those, attending from all over the world, and events at both of those organised from different parts of the movement from all corners of the globe, really like hugely inspiring and successful gatherings. Moving forward, we're planning a series of moments building towards COP. Yeah, they did have some great speakers, Callum, including yourself. So moving forward, the series of moments building towards the COP, including the G7 summit, which is also hosted by the UK government, and assuming that that does go ahead in person, will be the first major gathering of world leaders with a focus on climate change since the COVID pandemic, or at least of some world leaders. So G7 as a organizing moment for us in the coalition, and also Climate Week in September this year. And we're planning, hopefully, the pandemic and social distancing restrictions permitting, organizing in-person actions on the streets and hybrid in-person and online gatherings like from the ground up as well around these two summits, sort of counter summit to the G7, that sort of thing. In terms of the COP itself, we're planning for a day of action that's actually 2 days, so a 2-day window of action on climate justice on what would be the middle weekend of the COP, so Friday the 5th and Saturday the 6th of November, with Glasgow as a focal point, so hopefully a mass mobilisation in Glasgow, but also decentralised protests around the UK and around the world. And this is basically in recognition of the fact that, you know, COVID-19, it's going to seriously impact on overseas travel to Glasgow. We're already hearing from our international movements that many people are just not able to, you know, contemplate traveling for the COP, partly, you know, the reality of restrictions stopping them coming, but also partly the reality of the, you know, the work they need to do at home. And also it's also likely that there may still be an ongoing impact on travel within the UK, whether that is, you know, actually restricted, or whether that's about people feeling comfortable traveling or not. So some people will want to come to Glasgow, others won't. We'll also be organising a counter summit to the COP, because, you know, not everyone who would want to come and participate in activities around the COP will be able to get into the official summit. So we'll be organising a counter summit, a hybrid in-person online people's summit along the same lines as from the ground up. So events and activities organised by all different parts of the movement from all around the world. And of course, the advantage of doing that online and in person means it, you know, we're resilient to the pandemic, but we also have much greater reach than we normally would from just an in-person summit. And we're also in the COP26 Coalition working really closely with Stop Climate Chaos Coalition to ensure there are convergent spaces for activists to gather and accommodation to stay in for people who do want to travel to Glasgow. And of course, all of this, you know, COVID permitting, and adapting our plans to the sort of ongoing and changing context around that. So I think Flick is going to say a bit more in a few minutes about the accommodation platform and how you can support that. But in terms of getting involved in wider coalition plans and these mobilisations, if you're not already on the COP26 Coalition email list and the Slack channel, then you should get on that, and I'll try and find a link and share it in the chat in a minute. We've got working groups basically on political strategy, Glasgow local, communications, global solidarity, logistics, fundraising, arts and culture, mobilisations. So get involved with one of the working groups. There's loads of stuff to be done. We've also got a few caucuses up and running, so a people of colour caucus and a trade union caucus, and we're in the process of establishing a disability caucus. So loads of ways to get involved. It's probably also worth just sort of addressing what might be an elephant in the room about whether COP will actually go ahead, or you know, this November, or whether it will be delayed again. So obviously the pandemic is not going very well globally, and there are real challenges with organising an international conference like this in the context of a global pandemic. The UK government, who are the official hosts of COP, they're maintaining that it will take place in person. And you know, we know that both the UK government and the Scottish government are really keen for this to take place in person. They won't want it to move online, because of course for them the summit is not just about climate action, it's also about promoting brand Britain and brand Scotland to all these international delegates and governments. But there are some quite powerful voices, briefing and in support of a shift to an online COP. So some of the latest that we've heard from UK government is, officials sort of briefing the media that a further delay to spring next year is under contemplation. So at this stage, it's not clear whether and when, whether it will go ahead in November as planned, or whether it might be delayed again, or whether elements of it will be moved online. And the important things around this are there are really, there are real issues at stake in terms of whether this is held in person or online. So, it might sort of logically seem that if you have an online COP, oh, well, that's great. Nobody has to fly to it. You reduce carbon emissions and it's open to more people around the world. But actually, far from increasing accessibility like this, as some have suggested, a shift to online negotiations would seriously disadvantage Global South participation due to major challenges with digital connectivity, like the practicalities of interpretation and the resources to deliver interpretation, and coordinating across multiple time zones, right? Which is, that concretely impacts on Global South countries, far more than it does on Global North countries. Online negotiations would also be really limiting in terms of civil society access and influence on the talks. You can't protest an online summit, basically. They can mute you or kick you out, right? So we're really keen for the talks to go ahead in person. So Friends of the Earth are opposed to online talks. The COP Coalition hasn't actually taken a position on that yet, but we have produced a really useful briefing, which I can also post into the chat, about the key issues around online delay and different modes of working that when you've got a minute, you might be interested to read. But another key thing in all of this is that basically if COP was delayed again, it's no excuse for inaction on climate change. So the framework for global climate action is already established under the Paris Agreement, and for most of it, right, in terms of action to cut emissions and put climate finance on the table for Global South countries, we don't need a COP to formally progress the short-term action on that front. So it's absolutely no excuse for delaying climate action if COP is delayed again. And in terms of our activities as civil society, obviously the uncertainty, it makes things really challenging. To say nothing, that's in addition to the challenges of, not being able to meet up in real life and having to organize online. But if you remember our whole purpose of organizing around the COP, it's as much focused on movement building and using the COP as a moment to sort of leverage action from Scottish and UK and local governments as it is about trying to actually influence the talk. So we can still get on and do all that really important work, whether or not, in the context of this uncertainty and whether or not the COP is actually delayed or goes ahead. I'm just going to pause there because I think maybe time-wise I might be running out. Matthew did also ask me to share about what are the major issues like up for negotiation and sort of at stake at the COP. But I just want to check whether I should just stop or whether you want me to go into that.
Yeah, I think it's probably best to pause there, and we've got time. We need to take time tonight to hear what you've got to say about the things you've mentioned, and if the other stuff we can have at other meetings. So I think if it's what we'll do is pause for a few questions to Mary on that before we go on. If people have things they want to ask or even comments they want to make.
Like obviously, yeah. So Biden, one of the first things he did on his first day in office was set in motion the US rejoining the Paris Agreement. Obviously, Trump had pulled the US out, and it's good news, right? That Trump was an outright climate denier. Biden is not, and he's been making quite a big deal of climate action in his short term in office. However, like, you know, how much of this is sort of just rhetoric or sort of or greenwashing, or just not nearly ambitious enough, is another question. And just since you asked the question, it's an opportunity to sort of to raise the fact that actually the US have been incredibly obstructive in the UNFCCC over the last sort of 20, well, since its beginning. Basically, the US have not been a good faith actor in this, and the NDC, the pledge that Biden announced last week for what the US would do under the Paris Agreement, 50% reductions by 2030, it's nowhere near what they should be doing as you said, the world's second largest polluter in terms of, you know, actual emissions today, but as, you know, the outright biggest historical contributor to the climate crisis.
Thanks, Mary. We're going to have Des talking about trade unions on climate change, and Flick and Scott. So Des, over to you first. Thanks,
Matthew. We had our Scottish Trade Union Congress last week, which made a lot of policy statements, and one of those was to call on the trade union movement to do all it can to mobilise for people to attend a demonstration, which I believe is planned for the 6th of November. Now, we've done these big mobilisations in the past, and what it means for Edinburgh, for the trade union movement in Edinburgh, is basically getting 10,000 trade unionists to Glasgow on that day. And our past experience shows that to mobilise that number of people, you have to start with a date 6 months in advance. So we've got the time to do it, and we've therefore got to make sure that every trade unionist in the city actually gets the date in their diary. That's the first task we have to do. And then we have to talk about how do they get there? How do you get 10,000 trade unionists from Edinburgh to Glasgow? How's that organised in terms of transport and other things? So to make that, to ensure that type of mobilisation, the trade union movement is going to have to do a lot of work, and 6 months is just about the right time to do the type of work that would get that type of mobilisation. And what issues would mobilise the Edinburgh Trade Union movement to participate in this demonstration? Well, I think a lot of the issues have been touched on this evening, but I would say to you that the biggest crisis facing the Edinburgh Trade Union movement, which is related to climate, is actually a huge jobs crisis. Everyone forecasts that the ending of COVID will result in a huge climb in unemployment in Edinburgh and elsewhere in Scotland. I mean, people think that as well as 35,000 people employed in tourism in Edinburgh, all those jobs are up or have question marks. There's 75% of the people who work in the airports are not working at the moment, and the future of their jobs is at stake, and that's a big climate issue, is about what we do about air transports. And there's a whole series of other terms of public transport, rail transport, buses, everything. It's a whole crisis about jobs. And if you want to me, the big motivator for getting trade unions from Edinburgh through to Glasgow is this is the way you defend your jobs, or the way you put pressure on politicians to create green jobs. And I think everyone knows that this is an international issue, the creation of green jobs, never mind a Scottish or British issue. So I think that, to me, would be the main motivator for trade unionists to get through to Glasgow. It's a question of, you know, keep having a job and not descending in, you and your family descending into poverty. And this isn't a vague thing. I mean, most of the predictions I read is that at the moment there's about 23,000 children in Edinburgh who live in poverty, and the forecasts I read is that will double in the next year, from 23,000 to 46,000. And so you're talking about, in a year's time, unless something is done about it, a huge chunk of children in Edinburgh will be living beneath the poverty line, and all that means in terms of health, etc., both mental health and physical health. So I think at the moment that those are the big issues that will mobilise that amount of trade unions. And next meeting of Edinburgh TUC is 11th of May, and we're having a debate on what we do. And so I think we'll decide to try and mobilise as many people as possible, and then we have to decide on what issues we can mobilise people. And I think the fundamental issues which will count, even though I understand all the issues about climate change, the fundamental issues in the year 2021 which will mobilise people are green jobs and poverty. And those issues have to be tied into all the climate change issues. And I think that can be easily done. I think there are other issues, of course, other COVID issues, which about the number of people we need in an NHS or in the social care in Scotland, which basically means huge creation of hundreds of thousands of green jobs in public service. I think that's another issue which, as against unemployment, we're going to create useful green jobs for people. I think in Scotland, the vast majority of the jobs will be in public service, and we have to push for that. And I think tied into this is the fact that we'll have a new parliament. You can work out what's likely to be, who's going to be in power. But I think the interesting thing is that a third of the MSPs are going to change. That's a third of them are retiring. So not only are we dealing with a newly elected parliament, we're dealing with a parliament where there's going to be lots and lots of new faces. And one would like to think that these new faces will also be interested in dealing with climate change, will be interested in doing all they can to mobilise people for action in November. So I mean, I think those are. I don't want to say any more than that because I'd like to be able to tell you what we're going to do. I think we have to think about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and hopefully that will emerge in the next month or two. But I think our key priority will be getting as many trade unionists to Glasgow as possible. The target figure I have in mind is 10,000. And that will be organised via workplaces and unions, but our experience of the past, it will also be organised by communities too. So, for example, I would like to think that where I live in Edinburgh, Longston would have its own coach or whatever other means of transport to go through to COP26. I think we've got to think about organising at that level right throughout Edinburgh, whether it's Wester Hailes, Longston or Duddingston or Portobello, anywhere. We have to organise communities, and also as a trade union board would be particularly interested in organising vis-a-vis workplaces and unions. So yeah, we'd like to see lots of people from Meadowbank House, PCS members, organising 1,000 PCS members organise themselves to get through to Glasgow on the 6th of November. So I think that's my feeling. That will be our priority. But what else we're going to do is going to be up to, I think, in the first instance, what we decide on the 11th of May, but also what unions think that in terms of their own members, what will be the main focusing, mobilising issue. And these are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Des. It's great to have that level of ambition at the start, and dare I say it, maybe throwing down the gauntlet to other sections of the coalition. How many people are you going to mobilise? And obviously, well, people who know me will know that for many years I've been encouraging the labour movement, trade unionists to engage in the climate change issue. So your words are extremely welcome to me, Des. Willie, I see your hand, but I'm going to go through the speakers first and then come back to you. So then over to Flick. Flick's going to tell us some of the practical stuff to get the other end of the spectrum, like stuff we can maybe plan to do, particularly around accommodation. So I'll introduce Flick.
Thanks, Matthew, and hi everyone, good evening. Yeah, thanks for inviting me along. My name is Flick. I work for Friends of the Earth Scotland, and I am working on logistics. So I sit in the logistics working group within the COP26 Coalition. And that means anything from sourcing venues to helping with transport, supporting with visas, and happy to answer questions on any of these things afterwards. But it also importantly includes helping support people who may or may not be coming to Glasgow source affordable accommodation. And I'm going to talk for 5 minutes about a project that the COP26 Coalition and Stop Climate Chaos Scotland have been working on and are about to launch, and how you folks can help. And hopefully it will be something to kind of sink your teeth into, where, even amidst the uncertainty. And I'm really also happy to talk about the fun of trying to do logistics during a pandemic. It's great, it's a great challenge. So I'm just gonna share my screen. I've just got 5 or 6 slides. They're not too complicated. Oh, God, over here. Cool, can everybody see that?
Yep. Yep.
Great. Cool, and I'm also now not going to be facing my camera, so sorry if that's a bit weird. Okay, cool. So yeah, introducing the COP26 Coalition Homestay Network. So, all right, what is this COP26 Homestay Network? So to crack the accommodation challenge of potentially hosting thousands of activists who are potentially coming to Glasgow, and I can talk a little bit more about kind of scenario planning and COVID in a minute, we have created an online platform linking people in Scotland who are resident of the Central Belt, so it includes Edinburgh, which is why I'm here, to visitors and travellers from potentially anywhere who need accommodation during COP26. As I say, it's a way to accommodate potentially a lot of people. And when we were first brainstorming how to accommodate like loads, hundreds of thousands of folk way back last year before it was postponed, this was our big idea. It's low carbon, right? So people aren't staying in hotels and B&Bs. It's affordable, and it's a really potentially fantastic tool to connect people across Scotland who won't be going into the conference, right? Because most people don't get to go in. It's a very exclusive space. It's a way of connecting those people to the international climate movement and helping them like really play their part. Yeah, and helping the international climate movement succeed in our aims. It's potentially also the most COVID-friendly way to crack the accommodation challenge, which I will come back to. All right, so how does it work? Well, it's a little bit like other kind of online platforms like Couchsurfing or Airbnb, but importantly, it is not about making money. You can't really make money from it. It's for folks in the Central Belt, so within 1 hour of Glasgow, including Edinburgh. So residents in the Central Belt list their spare room or sofa or flat potentially on this online platform. And then visitors who are planning to travel can browse the listings and contact a host directly. And yeah, then guests are hosted. There's a small fee that happens. I can talk more about that. It's set by the host. It's very minimal. And the connection and hosting happens. So that's pretty much how it works. It's good tech and very easy to use and very straightforward. What does it look like? A little bit like this. So this is a screenshot from a few weeks ago. There's now more hosts up than this, but yeah, it's to be honest, you can just go on and look at it. It's launched, so or it's live. I'll put the link in the chat in a second. So yeah, you can. There's like a map tool where you can sort of see different listings, and then you can click on people's profiles and see kind of who they are, and then connect with them directly. So a little bit about COVID-19. So we think this platform is fantastic. We've been working on it for I guess it was built over the winter by a Copenhagen-based software company who are really great and get the climate element. And we're wanting to roll it out, except there's a pandemic on, right? Obviously, public health is our top priority, and we're only going to use the platform if it complies with Scottish Government regulations, like obviously. However, we're still asking people to sign up now, which is why I'm here talking to you, for kind of three main reasons. First is that a lot of people are planning already their stays in Glasgow. There's no accommodation because things have been block booked for ages. And accommodation that is available is incredibly expensive. And so it's really important that we're giving a bunch of accommodation options to people who may be planning their trip now, 6 months in advance. Another important thing is signing up as a host. To host people will encourage other hosts to sign up. This platform is all about momentum. And so if you can sign up in the next few weeks as a host and say, here's my place, I can host someone in November, that will encourage more hosts and it will build from there. And that would be fantastic. And also kind of thirdly, there's no obligation to host if things change in November. That could be change in terms of the pandemic situation, or it could be just like, if you're not up for hosting, you're free to say yes to any requests. You're free to say no to any requests. It's very open and you can use it as you like. But we are really encouraging people to sign up now, again, to kind of build momentum for our official launch in 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, so we have 2 asks. I've just said the first one, please sign up as a host. It's fairly straightforward again, but yeah, like these slides are also instructions as well, like they come later. And so I'll share these slides around with you and give you more information, I guess, in the follow-up email to this. Another thing we're asking if folks are up for it to give us feedback on the site. It's not completely 100% finished in that we're still wanting feedback and commentary to make it even better, to make sure it works for us, for the Scottish, UK and international climate movement. So yeah, we have various mechanisms for you to feedback in and say this thing needs changed or this thing would make it really good. So sign up as a host and give us feedback. And please help us promote the platform. So we are going to officially launch this on the 17th of May. You will probably be emailed by me to ask you to promote it through your networks. And in particular, like I'm pushing Edinburgh. I bet, yeah, I want a rivalry between Edinburgh and Glasgow, right? And so I'm trying to encourage this to get loads of people to sign up. So go Edinburgh and yeah, sign up to host someone. We want as many people as possible to sign up in the Central Belt to make this really successful. So I can share these slides with you. I think I'm going to stop screen sharing and take questions. Happy to talk more about anything that I have just.
I think what we'll just do is we'll hear. Well, you can introduce yourself. I mean, from Glasgow, called that polluters. Can you explain to us what you're doing and how it might connect to us and how we can support it in Glasgow? Over to you, Scott.
Indeed. Hello, everyone, and yeah, great to be here. And a big thanks for the invite. So yeah, I'm Scott, and I'm from Glasgow Calls Out Polluters, or GCOP for short. So yeah, I'll give a very quick journey around what we are campaigning on, our rough plans, a wee bit on why we think it's important, and like yeah, opportunities for like collaboration and further down the road. So we are organising around a specific part of COP26, namely the presence of big polluters at the talks. So think your usual oil majors like BP and Shell, fossil fuel financing banks like Barclays and HSBC, other perhaps lesser known climate criminals such as Drax, and polluting utilities companies like SSE, who are an official sponsor of COP26. These companies tend to get a pharaoh presence at COPs, which confers them with some obvious benefits. you know, they get this big PR platform to present themselves as part of the solution, which for anyone who follows the behaviour of big polluters knows is so far wide of the mark as to be quite ridiculous. But obviously these companies don't care too much because, you know, cultivating a positive public image deflects attention from their ongoing climate crimes. And yeah, they also get like the opportunity to lobby policymakers and even shape policy themselves. Such as when Shell admitted that they wrote a part of the Paris Agreement on carbon markets, in my opinion, a rubbish pro-corporate policy, and one that is on the agenda, one of the agenda items at COP26, after its implementation got delayed at COP25 following waves of resistance. So we know that these people like Shell, bear the brunt of responsibility for the climate crisis, but like the malevolent, self-serving entities that they are, they're also very keen to set the policy agenda in line with their interests. So in the spirit of global solidarity, you know, when a COP arrives in your city or your country, we feel there's a responsibility to do what you can to minimise the effects of big polluters on global climate policy. And by extension, you know, act in solidarity with communities across the world who are already fighting hard, often on the front lines, and may not even get to attend the COP if it goes ahead in November. So yeah, like the presence of big polluters has been like a sticking point at COPs, you know, basically from its inception, and like one of the many reasons why progress at the talks have been so catastrophically slow. The talks themselves are very much a playground for polluters, and you know, us at GCOP, we are merely the next thread of a very, very long tapestry of organising against big polluters at COPs. So, you know, this isn't, of course, an easy task, you know, because another reason for the slowness of progress is because of like the general corporate power over our political process. You know, we're actually seeing it this week again in the UK. We see it in our own Scottish government, who, you know, despite their socially progressive exterior, you know, do follow quite a pro-corporate policy agenda. And of course, we see it in institutions and governments across the world. So yeah, it's like a big old challenge to end all this. In fact, that's probably, you know, a bit of an understatement. But the COP moment is, you know, kind of like, it's kind of already been touched upon, but yeah, it's a big opportunity and a big moment, and yeah, one that we hope can serve to take steps towards ending the social license of big polluters to set the political agenda. But we also hope that we can take steps towards minimising their presence at future global climate summits, and of course, strengthen the climate movement at home too. So what's happening in Glasgow and the UK and in Scotland? You know, we organise kind of at a Glasgow level as GCOP and at a UK level as part of a Kick Polluters Out coalition alongside various other groups. Only because I'm pressed for time, I'll touch on one recent intervention that we made around COP26. This was the launch of our open letter to the UK government to kick polluters out of COP26, which I'll also post afterwards in the chat. As it stands, there are 209 organisational signatories from across the world, and the letter gives 5 key steps that the UK government could take to begin to shut polluters out of the talks. So like the processes of the COP are complex, you know, and some might say, you know, they're not very clear. But this is a time when the UK government as hosts hold a lot of agency, and you know, they could, if they wanted to, if they had the political will, take steps to begin to make this a reality. So we actually sent this like a month ago, and yeah, surprise, surprise, you know, there's been no response from the UK government as of yet, although at least have told us that they do plan to give us a response. But yeah, like we all know the politics that the UK government holds, and their politics on climate, so I'm not all of a sudden expecting them to decide that polluters should be kicked out, because, you know, they'd essentially be kicking out people like them from the talks. So the plan for the next few months is to like build and escalate, and like what that looks like, very much from our perspective, is to be decided. But it's likely, you know, that big polluters will be present in Glasgow when the talks arrive, even with the COVID restrictions. And like from our perspective, there will be like moments of action that can happen over the next few months that we will hopefully like lean on people across Scotland and across yeah, the UK to take part on. I should also say that we are quite an open group, and despite our kind of Glasgow centric name, we welcome and we're happy to link with people from Edinburgh. So if anything at all resonates with you and you'd like to get in touch, I'll pop our email in the chat box, and just feel free to ping us a message. We also have an email list that you can totally sign up to if you want updates on future actions and things that we are doing. Okay, I think that's me for everything. That's the kind of whistle top tour of what's going on in the kind of kick floaters at the COP space, and something that will be happening in Glasgow as COP comes. So yeah, just thanks very much for the time, folks, and happy to answer any questions, of course.
Brilliant. Thanks.